Hi, my name is Christopher Penn, co-founder and chief data scientist at TrustInsights.ai, and today we're talking about private social media, members only, the rise of private social media. So let's get started. The first age of social media was pretty easy to understand. It was big public social media networks like MySpace, if anyone remembers that back in the day, Friendster, uh, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. These were sort of the OGs of social networks, right? These are the companies that pretty much everybody knows. And it introduced this paradigm, this idea that you could have big public forums where people could communicate with each other, be social with each other, and share media with each other. Unsurprisingly, there were some issues that happened. Those big public conversations involve lots of people, and not all the discussions stay civil, shall we say, which ushered in the second age of social media, the messaging era. This is platforms like WeChat and WhatsApp and Snapchat and Line, Tango, Kik, you name it, 2010 to 2015. Group texts, things like that. This form of social media happened entirely behind closed doors among close acquaintances and friends and family. You have great conversations with people, and it really was the best way to stay in touch. The challenge with public social media in particular, that is both a societal one and a problem, particularly for marketers, is that public social media has all kinds of problems. We talked about this just a minute ago. There are privacy issues, such as Facebook allowing companies like Cambridge Analytica to not only harvest data, but then use it for malicious purposes like influencing elections. There are all sorts of issues with using AI-based algorithms to try and surface content that gets more engagement, because engagement fuels the ad buys that are the true customers of these networks. And in doing so, creates perverse incentives that are not the healthiest outcomes, right? Incentives to make people angry or afraid or hostile to each other, to inspire and promote misinformation and disinformation, fake news, if you will, to disrupt people's happiness, to cause every manner of discrimination and shaming and stuff like that. All of these things are ongoing. They're happening today. They are honestly more of a problem than ever. One of the biggest sources of misinformation, disinformation funding is hostile foreign powers like Russia, which was dumping millions and millions of dollars into creating all sorts of disarray, trying to undermine entire democracies. And amidst all this, for us as marketers, as marketers, the challenge we're running into is, as the ad dollars have to continue to increase to meet Wall Street's projections, our ability for our stuff to be seen, our content to be seen, continues to fall and fall and fall. Earlier this year, Trust Insights, in collaboration with Agorapulse, put together the social media barometer of engagement rates across 5 major social networks. The highest level of engagement on average was on LinkedIn, with about 1% of posts were being engaged with. Most social networks, you're lucky if it's 1/10 of 1%. If 1 out of 1,000 people interacts with you. We also have other major issues with public social media because they are all ad driven. Increasing percentages of the population don't see those ads. When we look at, for example, from Hootsuite, the percentage of the population that uses ad blockers, which do work on social networks, not a single category is less than 25%, right? At least 25% of any audience is not seeing our advertising, right? So we're spending this money. We're We're trying to reach people. We're trying to retain people. We're trying to just get people to see our content. And they're not, right? When people are asked why do they use ad blockers, 62% say there's too many ads, or they get in the way to protect my privacy. They're not relevant, and so on and so forth. So public social media, as a result, is in a decent amount of trouble. Ads are being seen less. People are tired of advertising, and they're fleeing. They want to go someplace else. Where are they going? Private social media networks. So let's take a moment to define what this means, because I've said this term a few times now. Private social media networks are characterized by 4 major aspects, right? The first aspect is privacy. Private social media platforms, by definition, are out of the public eye. You don't see them. You can't search for them. You can't see the content. There's no public feed. There's no notifications in the public. You have no idea what's going on in these communities. They're hidden away. The second is chronology. Companies like Instagram and Twitter have been dogged by users for years saying, bring back the chronological timeline. I just want to see what's being posted in the order it was posted. And these companies, of course, because they're ad-based, said, no, we want to surface stuff that will engage you the most so that we can keep your eyeballs on us. Private social media networks don't do that. By definition, they are all chronological, which means, yes, you do have to spend some time scrolling up in a lot of these communities if you want to see what's been said, but you get to see things as it happens. The third differentiator for private social media is that there's no algorithms, right? There's nothing trying to surface content. This is one of the biggest differentiators between private social media and public social media. There's nothing trying to push specific types of content, because private social media platforms, and this goes into the point 4, they don't make revenue on ads. Their revenue models are different, usually subscription-based models, where users, either companies or users or both, are paying fees to these companies to host content and stuff instead of ads. So there's no incentive for a private social network to have an algorithm, right? There's no reason to highlight or push certain people's content more than others. It's just all as it happens. So what are these networks? Well, there's a whole bunch of them. For example, there is services like Discord, which started out as a gaming platform in 2015 and now has spread to become probably the largest purveyor of private social networks, where people can sign up and create their own Discord servers, their own communities. And there's hundreds of thousands of these things being created every month. There's Slack, which many of us know in the B2B world for basically being internal chat. This is a collaboration platform where people in a workspace can communicate with each other, but you can also join public Slack groups. Right? There are public Slack groups that are not for a specific particular company, that are communities. For example, I run one, my company runs one, Trust Insights, called Analytics for Marketers. In fact, if you go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers, you can see an example of this type of private social media community. There's about 2,800 people just having conversations without all the ads, without all the interruptions and stuff like that. There's services like Telegram, for example, and Signal. These are platforms which are known for group chats that are highly encrypted, that are totally out of the public eye, more difficult to find, but a lot of very useful information is shared. Telegram in particular is very popular overseas with in countries that are outside of the continental United States. It is especially popular in places like India and Eastern Europe. And you will find communities for just about everything. Now, this stuff is not new, right? The idea of private communities is as old as the internet, from things like bulletin boards, all the way back. If you want to go back to the mid to late 90s, there was a system that still exists today called Internet Relay Chat, or IRC. And in fact, it's kind of funny when you look at the format and structure and commands of services like Slack and Discord. They are actually just IRC with a very fancy skin and a sort of a federated community. So you don't have to like hunt down some obscure IRC server. You just open up Slack or Discord, the apps. But functionally, that's exactly what they are. They're just chat rooms. They are really private chat rooms. Now you'd be saying that sounds great, but what if there's like 5 people? Is it really worth our time? Well, let's talk about the market size of private social media. We conducted a survey 2 months ago now, national survey in the United States, 2,000 respondents, and we asked what percentage what percent of the time do you use this social media network at least once a week? We kept TikTok in there, even though it's a public network, because we wanted a calibration benchmark. And 32% of folks said that they use TikTok. Discord was 9.2% of the population. Signal was 8.2%. Telegram was 8%. Slack and Twitch 6%. Give that some thought. All right. Discord in particular, 9.2% of the population. This is the population 13 and up. No, it's 18 and up because our surveying software is limited. 18 and up. So you're talking about 250 million people total, give or take. This is saying essentially 25 million people use Discord. Right? That is a large community. 21 million people use Signal. 15 million people use Slack once a week or more. That is a healthy size, right? Consider that the number of people who listen to a podcast once a week in the same population is only about 75 million people. So these private social media platforms are garnering a lot of attention. And the speed at which we're creating these platforms has gone crazy since, unsurprisingly, since the pandemic began, right? For a good chunk of time in 2020, we were all, sitting in our houses wondering what to do. And we all joined in many of these communities, many of these things. Discord in particular has on the order of tens of thousands of new servers being created every single month, which is just astonishing. So that's what private social media is. It is these communities out of the public eye. So how do we get started with these? What do we need to do if we want to make this part of our marketing mix? The first step is not to just go off and start our own Discord server. That's a bad idea. The first part is to study, right? To go into private social media communities, almost like you were an anthropologist of some kind, and watch, listen, see how people run different kinds of communities, because you'll pick up all kinds of ideas and tips and tricks and ways of doing things just from observing. For example, this is Joe Polizzi's Discord server called The Tilt. This is, to me, a fascinating community. It's all about content marketing and Web3. And what he's done, which I think is really cool, is not only do you join this community and have conversations with folks, but if you buy his creator coin, which is a type of cryptocurrency, if you buy certain amounts of it, you get access to different channels, different sections of the community based on the amount of membership tokens you hold, right? So if you are one holder of one coin, you get certain channels. If you hold 5 coins, you get to certain channels. If you hold 20 coins, you get certain other channels. And the content in those is exclusive. It's a very, very clever way to run a community. In one of the writing groups that I'm in, there are dozens of channels that are all sorts of very entertainment based. There's one channel for writing sprints where people can join in, and at a certain time on the clock, everybody starts writing, and then 15 or 20 minutes later, the little alarm goes off and everybody enters how many words they wrote. And it's kind of this little competition that people have to urge each other on to write more, to be more creative and stuff. And again, such a cool idea to be able to use these tools to foster that sense of community. So your first step is going around and studying. Join Analytics for Marketers and see some of the things we do. Join Content Marketing Institute. Join Spin Sucks. There's join the Marketing AI Institute. There's so many Slack and Discord communities that you can join and just see how they do things. The second step is Start looking at influencers. Start looking around at influencers, because what you're going to find, particularly with influencers under the age of 30, is that there's a public and private component to what they do. So they have public components where people can find them, and then they divert that audience away from the public channels to private channels. You'll see this especially with folks on platforms like Twitch. This is an example of my friend Siwa's Twitch channel. You can see there's public social media, but then there's the Discord server, and so on and so forth. And what influencers are doing is taking their public audiences and funneling them into private communities. This is a really important tactic, because all of these folks know they don't own their public audiences, but as long as you are running your community on a private service, you have a bit more ownership to it. And remember, this is not just entertainment based. This applies to every kind of company or brand or individual that's running something that it wants to be seen publicly, and then nurture that community privately. Find those influencers, learn from them, look at their best practices, look at the things that are working for them, look at the measures they use, the metrics they use to judge their own success. And then build your own private social media community. Now, how do you do this? How do you do this in a way that is going to be effective? There's a 5-step process to building a private social media community. We call it the 5 Ps. Your purpose, people, process, platform, and performance. So let's go through each of these on building a private social media community and see what it takes. Our first step is that purpose. We need to define the purpose of our private social media community. And there's 2 angles you may want to do this on. There's going to be what's in it for you, the brand or the company. And then there's what's in it for your audience. Let's look at it from the brand perspective in this example, but you'll want to do this in 2 different ways. You're going to create what's called a user story. And this is simply a statement of, as a, whatever your role is, I need to perform some function so that you get some outcome. Let's take an example. As a marketing manager, I need a safe place I can ask questions so that I don't make preventable mistakes, right? That might be a user story for somebody who would join the Analytics for Marketers Slack. They want a safe place to ask questions that maybe seem like, to them, dumb questions, but they need to be able to do that. So that informs the purpose of our community. If we are the community owners, we want to serve this need. And this need is to provide that safe place. And so we now have a very clear purpose for our private social media community. We want it to be a discussion hub, as opposed to maybe it's an entertainment community. Maybe it is a community based on promoting a certain product or service. But this was our sort of user story for the people who are most likely to join our private social media community. The second step is the people themselves. Who are these people, right? Who are the people that we're trying to get a hold of? Again, when we looked at our survey data, what we saw was that across other characteristics, the major private social media community audience that would be interested in these things really is under the age of 35. Right? That is one of the distinguishing factors. They're above that age, public social media is still the more dominant. So this is, again, not something that you're going to do and just drop everything else. This is something to maintain in addition to your public social media communities. You want to focus on people who have a common interest. What is that common interest? What brings people together? An event like this, for example, this is Marketing Profs B2B Forum, I believe. What brings that interest together? What is the common interest? One of the things that is changing about social media in general is that we are moving away from who to follow and focusing more on what to follow. Services like TikTok, for example, are very much engines of topical discovery. Same for YouTube in a lot of ways. And even Instagram's gotten in on this, having you follow hashtags rather than just following people, because there's a recognition that people are interested in topics as well as individuals. So you want to you want to be very clear when you're looking for people. What is it that the people are interested in? One of the ways to do this is in these different communities, listen. Listen to what people are talking about. Listen to the topics people are talking about. Ask people, where do you spend your time online? What services are you on in your audience? Your audience might say, yeah, we use LinkedIn groups all the time. And if you want to go where the people are for now, that might be a place to start. I would, again, caution against using any platform that has a public social media component to it, because you're competing with ad space, right? You're competing with the news feeds and algorithms. But ask your audience, where do you spend your time in private social media communities now? Understanding that, again, we're talking about 10-ish% of the population, so it's not going to be everybody, but those people who are in these private communities already understand the value of them and the value of what it is that you're trying to create. The next step is the process. How do we set up one of these communities? And there's so many different aspects to setting up a community process. At the very least, you will want to create a code of conduct. You'll want to create some rules around community, because a community without rules is a community that will go away very soon. You want to have rules that are very clear, that help people understand the expectations that you hold them to, and honestly, the expectations they should hold you to as well. This is an example. Again, this is from our Slack community. Be respectful, considerate, and kind. Comply with moderators. Reach out to moderators. Do not share prohibited content. Do not direct message people without their consent. Never reveal other people's personal information. Read the channels and use them accordingly. Stay aligned with the overall acceptable use policy. Conduct yourself in a professional manner. And these rules vary from community to community. There are some communities where the rules, there's a couple of them that I'm in. The rules are, don't be a jerk. Rule 1 is don't be a jerk. Rule 2, see rule 1. For running a community effectively, you generally need a bit more than that. One of the things that is a challenge for a lot of people running private social media communities is being objective. Particularly if there are people in the community that are more engaged than others, or there are people who are your actual friends. You want to have these rules written down so that it takes a lot of that subjectivity away. Second thing you have to do is you have to feed your community. Right? You have to provide your community with engagement, and especially in the beginning, in the first 400 members, you are going to be the primary driver of activity, asking people questions, doing all sorts of practices just to get people thinking and participating and engaging. For example, one of the things we do in our community is ask a question of the day, regardless of what else is going on. Reminding people, hey, we exist, and we're talking about something that you might be interested in. So questions of the day are very powerful. Depending on the platform you choose, many different features are available. This is from a Discord server I'm in, where people hold music parties. They are essentially just people playing stuff on their playlists, kind of like DJing online. And other people in the community can join in and listen to these music parties while they're working. There are communities that do watch parties, watch videos together and things. There are professional communities that do watch parties, things like conference sessions, like this, where people can participate, where people can offer commentary. You can have sort of like a Mystery Science Theater 3000 almost kind of thing. There's no limit to the kinds of activities and opportunities that you can put in front of people. And there's sharing content, right? There's sharing all sorts of stuff. This is, again, from a movie night thing where people are watching movies together, but discussing articles, even doing stuff together. The Tableau Slack community, before it shut down, used to have what's called Makeover Mondays. They would publish a data set, and the community would sort of have the contest and build a visualization from that data set. One of the writing groups I'm in has a monthly writing contest. People submit pieces of work, and the community as a whole judges them and offers improvements. So part of successfully running a private social media community is having lots of opportunities for people to participate in all different kinds of formats, all different kinds of ways. The next section is choosing your platform. Which platform are you going to be on? This is going to be dependent on where people spend their time and the features that you need. For example, Analytics for Marketers, this is on Slack. We started this community 4 years ago, I think. It was 3 or 4 years ago. And at the time, Slack was probably the most dominant platform. It is one that marketers are very comfortable with because it's used a lot in companies. It is particularly relevant to B2B marketers. B2B marketers in particular tend to spend a lot of time on Slack, again, either with their own companies or with their clients if they work at agencies and things like that. So it is a good choice for that crowd. For maximum flexibility, affordability, and particularly attracting a crowd of folks who the crowd is that's 35 and under, Discord is by far the fastest growing, largest private social media community user base. I think there's something like 500 million monthly users log on to Discord now, at least once a month, if not more often. Discord started out as a gaming system, but it has grown exponentially since then to every topic under the sun. There's tons of cryptocurrency communities, there's content marketing communities, there's SEO communities, there is everything you can possibly imagine, including a bunch that are not safe for work. From a cost perspective, if you were to pay for a Slack community, and you can run it in a free version, and essentially what happens is you lose data after 90 days. It's a rolling 90-day window of messages that can be searched and things. And after that, after 90 days, stuff falls off. If you pay to upgrade, Slack costs you $8 a month per user per month. So that is, Discord, on the other hand, to boost a server to level 3 is 14 boosts, and each boost is $35. So it's about $500 a year. So again, that's a lot more affordable to do things like better quality live streams, custom URLs, and so on and so forth. Much more affordable. And again, this is a tremendously popular service. It is more complex out of the box to get it set up with best practices than Slack is. But if I were starting over today with the audience I have now, I would 100% start on Discord instead of Slack. And finally, of course, there are services like Telegram and Signal and stuff we mentioned. Again, for international audiences, there are a lot of people who are using Telegram and stuff already. And there are folks who are in certain industries that prefer it much more, cybersecurity, finance. So depending on what industry you're in, you may see easier adoption of these services based on what your audience says. Finally, there's the performance. How do you know whether this stuff is working? How do you know whether private social media communities are a good idea? There are a bunch of different ways that you can measure private social media communities. One is looking at levels of activity, right? How many people, excluding yourselves, this is an example from our Slack community, how many people are participating on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. You can either use the built-in analytics tools, or you can, as we do, roll your own. Looking at how active are things. 2022 has been a fantastic year for us. It's been a year where people have really started stepping into the service. You can do topic analysis of a community you own. Again, looking at the conversations people are having, what it's about, and figure out, are we aligned with our audience? The conversations people are talking about, are we covering them? If we're not, then obviously we can fix our own content marketing. There's, of course, looking at who your most prolific users are within a community and making sure that you extend other opportunities to them, because they may be great collaborators, content creators. These communities can be a huge shot in the arm for any kind of content marketing program. If you're trying to figure out what to create content about, go to the super users in your community, look at stuff, invite them on your live streams or your podcasts and stuff, and build out really terrific content from them. There's tremendous opportunities that from the product, the output being the community, you can leverage. And of course, for what a lot of marketers care about, is it showing up in your attribution models? Right? Is it helping with conversions? For us, this is from our August reporting. This is out of our Google Analytics data. Our private social media community, Slack, is responsible for 5% of our conversions for this particular goal in our website. That's more than LinkedIn. That's more than Facebook. That's more than Twitter. That's more than any of the public channels. It is actually more than our organic search. The only thing that beats it is our email marketing. Think about that. That's pretty impressive that our private social media community is doing so much heavy lifting that it is outclassing Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, right? This is a very optimistic indicator of the value of private social media communities. If you can get an additional 5% more leads, would you want to, right? And that doesn't count in things like customer retention, loyalty, evangelism, people linking to your content publicly and helping you with inbound links for SEO. This is just the attribution modeling itself. There's tremendous value to private social media networks. Now, let's talk about the 3 things you're probably going to do wrong with private social media communities, especially on your first couple of tries. Number 1, the thing you'll do most wrong initially is you're going to try and sell. Right? You're going to try and make it a sales-focused thing. This is a natural thing for marketers to do, particularly marketers that have a tight integration with sales, or in the absolute worst possible scenario, sales is running the private social media communities. This is not a case where you're always being closing. Doing this will kill your group very, very quickly because nobody wants to be sold to yet again. Remember, at least for us in our community, when we constructed that user story, people want a safe place to ask questions. The user stories and the feedback we gathered, no one said, I would like to have a place where you can send me sales pitches, right? Nobody wants that. So you may want to set up internal rules at your company as to who can do what in the private social media community if you're building one for yourself, right? You may have to say, hey, sales folks, yeah, we're muting you. You're muted. You're not allowed to talk because we know what you're going to do. So you want to be very clear that the community's focus is on the community itself and being helpful on fulfilling those user stories and whatever it is that people care about. If you do it well, there will be some natural sales benefit anyway, because people will ask questions and say, hey, here's the answer. And by the way, we do that too, right? Or after a while, if you're providing good content and good conversation, people will understand, okay, Trust Insights will help me with my analytics. Trust Insights will help me with my marketing strategy, and so on and so forth. Second thing you will do wrong, your community will be neglected. Right? You will forget to maintain your community. It is a task. It is a product. It requires the effort and the resources and the people especially to keep it vibrant, and that means you. Right? That means you checking in multiple times a day and participating in discussions, trying different tactics, hosting events. It is no less of a commitment than it is to the things that you do as an employee at your company, right? Going to meetings and making sure that you're participating and helping out. These are things that are really important that are part of running a private social media community. And you have to make that commitment. It's not going to happen on its own, especially if you're under 1,000 people. It's definitely not going to happen on its own. And third, you will forget to enforce the rules, or you will differentially enforce the rules. Toxic people in communities kill communities very quickly. Very quickly. And you don't need a ton of them, right? You don't need to drink a gallon of cyanide for it to kill you. Just a little bit will do. You don't need a ton of toxic people to ruin a company. One is enough. One person is enough to wreck a community if they're toxic and you don't either put them on the guardrails or kick them out. And that's not just people who are, spammers who just fly in and say, buy my thing and then fly away or get kicked out. It's also people who they're just unpleasant in a professional community, right? They are disrespectful of others. They are uncivil. They may be breaking the rules. Again, this is a reason why it's very important to have clear rules defined. I have seen some pretty egregious examples of people who belittle others. They behave like jerks. I've seen people sexually harass others, things, and all those are things that, as the operators of a community, you've got to drop the banhammer on. Just be like Thor and just crush that behavior, so that everybody else in the community sees you are standing up for your community, you are defending your community, you're protecting it from these harmful influences. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean rigid censorship, but it does mean keeping things on the rails, and it absolutely means getting rid of toxic people as quickly as you can. And again, you have to define that with your rules. So that's what private social media communities are all about. Right? We talked about the people, the processes, the platforms, your purpose, performance, and how important this is, because community in the customer journey, community is something that reinforces every stage of the customer journey. At every point in the customer journey, somebody is saying, who can I ask for advice on this? Who knows this thing? Who can help me? A good community does exactly that. A good community is helping at every single part of the customer journey, but especially in the owner's journey after somebody's bought, right? From simple things like, hey, I bought this thing and it doesn't work. What am I doing wrong? To what else goes with this product or service? Or what are some neat new ways to use this thing? And your community can provide that and so much more. It's a boon to your content marketing. It is a boon to your loyalty. It is a boon to being able to just keep the attention of your customers and your prospective customers in an environment where attention is more fragmented than ever. If people know they have a safe space to go to where they can be themselves a bit more, they can get some enrichment, they will give that value back to you. So if you've got some comments and questions and stuff, please stop by. We've got a free study. Go to trustinsights.ai/members-only study. But feel free to drop line and do join the Slack community over at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. You can see this all for yourself firsthand, right? This is free to join, no charge of any kind. You can see how we do this by example. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.